What's up everyone, I'm Monster from Fusion, and today I've got an amazing video planned for you guys. Essentially, some of our editors have come together and created a crazy in-depth tutorial on how to successfully do 3D in Rocket League. Now it's going to cover a lot of things like how to install CinematicsBuddy, how to record and import into After Effects, how to make and create 3D effects such as text, logos, particles, models, optical flares, sky placement, and so much more. This video is also going to cover how to execute these effects properly with stuff like high quality lighting, and it'll also go over how to use CinematicsBuddy with programs such as Blender and Cinema 4D. Now this is a very long video, so we've made sure to put the timestamps in the description so you can click on which one's relevant to you and skip to that time. If you have any further questions, make sure to check out our Discord, which is linked below, along with our other socials. Let's get right to it.
Hi, I'm EQ, and this section of the tutorial will go over how to install and configure CinematicsBuddy, which is the core of this tutorial. This Backsmod plugin lets you use position and rotation values directly from Rocket League in order to execute loads of interesting 3D effects. The first step is to open the browser of your choice. Go to Backsmod.com. Let's click on plugins at the top here, type in CinematicsBuddy, and this is going to show up. And before we click install with Backsmod, we got to make sure that we have both Backsmod and Rocket League open. Then click open plugininstaller.exe, and as you can see here, it should say success 1. If that for some reason did not work for you, let's do an alternate method of installing. So let's go inside Rocket League, click F2 to open the Backsmod menu, plugins at the top here. Let's click open plugin manager. Next to ID, let's click and type in 95. Let's click on install by ID. So if the previous installation didn't work for you, this should now have installed CinematicsBuddy, as we can see at the top here. In the plugins tab, let's click on CinematicsBuddy here. As you can see, there's a lot of different text boxes. At the top here, the first one is a checkbox that says automatically increment file names. This one automatically adds an underscore and the number at the end of your file names. So I strongly suggest having this enabled, and then we can jump straight to file name if we call this one clip. For this example, the first one is going to be named clip, and the second one is going to be named clip _2 and then _3 and etc. That's what automatically incrementing file names do. And you can also click save current Dollycam path. Basically what this does is that it saves the Dollycam path with the same name as your CinematicsBuddy path. It's gonna save that path to the same file directory under the same name as the CinematicsBuddy. Camera name is what the camera is gonna be called inside of your software. You can call it whatever you want. Special path. This one is really important for keeping your projects organized. Now, let's go into File Explorer and find where we want our video footage and our CinematicsBuddy paths and our Dollycam paths. Let's click in the empty area next to it right here. Then click Ctrl C on your keyboard. Inside the special path, let's click Ctrl V. Now, before we move on, it's really important that we replace all the backslashes with a / in this file directory. And also it's really important that you add a / at the end. Okay, next up are the bindings. Let's click the bindings tab at the top here. Let's click add at the top left. Then let's double click right here. In this area, let's type in CB recording start. Click on this. Let's click save. And where it says none at the top here, let's click that. Let's find a key that isn't used by anything else in your editing process. I'm going to use this key. Let's click save. We also got to add the stop recording though. So let's click add again. In this area, double click CB recording, auto complete it to recording stop. Click save. Click none here again. Click the key you want for stopping recording. And the bindings are done and ready to go. Before we move on to the recording section, let's go into settings, video. I strongly recommend capping that to 60 so that the CinematicsBuddy path won't stay behind. It takes a toll on your system if it has to record both the CinematicsBuddy path and footage when it's rendering a game in the high frame rate. On to recording. This section will cover recording with CinematicsBuddy and with OBS and NVIDIA Shadowplay, as those are the two most common recording softwares. This part will not include how to make a cinematic with Dollycam though. If you want to learn that, I strongly suggest the tutorials by Zeke or Linksy. The link will be down below in the description. I'm going to show you first how to record with NVIDIA Shadowplay. To open NVIDIA Shadowplay, you gotta click Alt-Z on your keyboard, or whichever keybind you bound it to yourself. First, click on the tooth wheel here, click on Recordings, click on 3 dots next to them here. Now we gotta navigate to the file directory that we've chosen inside of CinematicsBuddy. Okay, so now that we've navigated to the same file directory as we have chosen for our CinematicsBuddy and Dolly paths, let's click done, click back. Let's scroll down to video capture. For the bitrate, I suggest keeping it at 50,000. Let's go back. Next up, the keybinds. I'm gonna click on keyboard shortcuts. There should already be a default one assigned. I'm just gonna keep that for this tutorial, but if you want a manual one, just click on this and then enter your new key binding. Okay, now that keybinds are set up, let's exit NVIDIA Shadowplay by clicking the cross at the top here. I really recommend setting the recording speed to 25 or 10% in order to make the CinematicsBuddy path align better with our video footage. For this video, I'm gonna record in 25% speed. Let's click on the key for starting the CinematicsBuddy path. Then let's click on the key for starting the video recording. Then start the replay. Okay, now that the path is done, let's click stop recording for both CinematicsBuddy and NVIDIA Shadowplay. As you can see, NVIDIA Shadowplay has created a new folder for our Rocket League recordings. So let's open this folder. Now, as you can see, there will be 3 files here. The top one is going to be our video footage. The one that ends with .txt is going to be our CinematicsBuddy path. And the one that doesn't have a file type is going to be our Dollycam path. Next up, I'm going to show how to record with OBS. Okay, now that we have OBS open, let's click on settings here. Then let's click on output. The top here where it says simple, let's click this and change it to advanced. Now let's click on recording here, click browse next to the recording path. Now again, let's navigate to the file directory that we want our recordings in. Click select folder inside of rate control. Make sure this is set to CBR. Inside bitrate, put this to whatever you like. I prefer having mine at 50 or 100,000. And then we can click apply. Next up, let's click on video here where it says base canvas resolution. Make sure that this is set to the same resolution as your game. Make sure that the output resolution is also set to that. Here, make sure that this is set to common FPS values. Set it to 60 and click apply. And go into the advanced tab under recording here where it says file name formatting. Type in preferably the same as you did in the CinematicsBuddy file name setup. Click OK. Let's add game capture as that's what is most stable from my experience. Plus here inside of sources, click game capture. We can call this Rocket League if we want to. Now let's click on this, change it to capture specific window. Inside of window, select Rocket League, click OK. In order for the best performance, I also recommend right clicking here in the window and disabling enable preview in order to save computer resources. Next up is the bindings. Let's click on settings here, click on hotkeys. Okay, so since OBS uses 2 different keybinds for starting and stopping recording, just like CinematicsBuddy, we can actually bind these to the same key. This is the key that I use for starting recording, and then let's do the same for stopping recording. Let's click OK. Now that we have our bindings done, let's get it back into Rocket League. Then let's click our keybinds for starting recording inside of OBS, which is also going to trigger the recording for CinematicsBuddy. Okay, then let's click our keybinds for stopping recording in OBS, which will also stop the recording inside of CinematicsBuddy. Now, let's prepare reflectivity for our 3D models inside of our editing software. We're going to create what's called an ENV map, also known as an HDRI or a reflection map. Then we're going to move to the location where we want our 3D object to be in. Then I'm going to open the console again. Then I'm going to type in Dollycam set FOV space 170. This might look really weird to you, but if you look at the examples on screen now, an HDRI should technically be a 360-degree photo of the environment. So this is what we're going to use for our HDRI. Let's take our screenshot. This can be done in various methods. I like using light shot. As you can see, we have the video recording, the CinematicsBuddy path, the Dollycam path, and our environment map, which means we are set and ready to roll into After Effects. Next up is the After Effects setup. Let's create our project, click new project here, click new composition. For the width and height, let's set that to the same as our recording, and let's set my FPS to 24. This is going to be my main composition. So now I'm going to find the video recording, drag this into my timeline. I'm going to disable audio. Now let's right click on this, click pre-compose, switch to move all attributes into the new composition, and make sure that adjust composition duration is also ticked. Click OK. Double click on this layer to go inside of the pre-composition. Do Ctrl K to open the composition settings. And this is where it's really important that your aspect ratio is 16:9. Now the next step is to import our CinematicsBuddy path. Before we do this, it's really important that your After Effects is set to English. Now let's click File in the top left here, click Scripts, click Run Script File. Now let's navigate to the CinematicsBuddy to After Effects script. We can click Windows key R on our keyboard, type in %appdata%, click Enter. Let's open BoxMod here, go into BoxMod, then go into Data, go into CinematicsBuddy, click on Plugins, click on After Effects. Now we have found the CinematicsBuddy to After Effects script. We're going to click here, click Ctrl-C on our keyboard, back into the pop-up box from After Effects, and next to the empty area here, click Ctrl-V on our keyboard, Enter. As you can see, it has navigated us to the script. If we run the script now, the next time we do File Scripts Run Script, it's going to automatically put us in this file directory. Open this, and it's going to open a second box. This is completely intentional. Now what we got to do is navigate to the file directory that we chose inside of CinematicsBuddy. The clip.txt is what is going to be matching with our video footage. We're going to click on this. You can see that it did create everything. Now, in order to align the CinematicsBuddy path with our video footage, you can go into the description of the video to download a script. Click on the file, click Ctrl-C on your keyboard, File, Scripts, Run Script File. When you're inside this folder, hit Ctrl-V on your keyboard. Before you run the script, select the camera, hold Shift, and then click the floor layer. We're going to click on the CinematicsBuddy trim utility, open this, and as you can see, it cut all of these layers later. This is for aligning it with the video. So right at the beginning of the camera and ball and all of the car layers is where it starts moving, as you can see on the grids here. In order to trim the video, all you gotta do is look through and see where it starts moving. So that would be on this frame. Trim our layer to there by dragging from the beginning and holding Shift. I'm just gonna snap to the playhead, and now we can move the video over here. Hold Shift, select all the layers, move them to the beginning of your composition. Now the CinematicsBuddy path is gonna be aligned with our video footage like this. Now for a cleaner timeline, I suggest disabling all of these layers. I also recommend toggling on the shy layer, which is going to be this little hidden icon here. Click the ball null, drag downwards until all of them are selected. If you click this icon right here, it's going to hide all of the shy layers, which makes your timeline a lot cleaner. So that was all about the After Effects setup for CinematicsBuddy. On to the next part. Next up is 3D positioning. This part will show how to place objects inside and outside of the field, and we're mainly going to do this with 2D objects, as Tornado is going to mention how to do it with Element 3D later in the tutorial. I'm going to start off by right-clicking in my timeline, clicking New Text, click on the layer again, hit Ctrl-Alt-Home on my keyboard, and then hit Ctrl-Home. That's going to center this to the middle of the screen. I can also change the size if I want to by double-clicking the layer, opening character here on the side, and then increasing the size. I'm going to enable 3D on my layer, which you can do by clicking under the icon here in the switches panel. So we're going to click here under the cube to enable 3D for our layer. It's going to automatically place under the middle of the field. Then we can click this to unhide our shy layers. Going to enable the left wall to see. So we're going to click this layer, hit P on our keyboard. I'm going to click on the position text here, hit Ctrl-C on our keyboards. I'm going to click the text layer, hit Ctrl-V to paste the positions. And as you can see, it's going to automatically place here. If it's rotated the wrong way, you can just hit R to bring up the rotations and then rotate it. But as you can see, it's facing outwards just as I want it. I can change the scale if I want to. I can change the position. The x-axis is going to be the length of the field. The y-axis is the height of the field, and the z-axis is going to be the width of the field. I want mine a little bit outwards from the wall, so I'm going to bring it a bit closer. I'm going to bring it a bit to the right, a bit downwards. Now, if we skim through the timeline, you can see that it's perfectly placed a bit inwards from the wall. Let's say you're making a cinematic outside of the field and you don't have anything to reference. Enable the shy layers again so you don't see any of those layers. I'm going to switch from active camera to the top camera. I'm going to zoom out a bit, and if I hit Ctrl-Shift-H on my keyboard, you can see that that should toggle the camera. Okay, I'm going to reset the position for the text. If I know that I want the text in front of the camera at this position, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the camera, P on the keyboard. I'm going to turn off the keyframes for each of these, Then I'm going to select all of them. You can do this by holding Shift, then Control C. Before you move on, it's important that you go back and you re-enable the keyframes. Control Z on your keyboard. Now if I click my text layer and hit Control V, as you can see, it's going to paste the same position as the camera has for that frame where you disabled all the keyframes. Then you can click the layer and move the text to wherever you want it. And now if I click here where it says top, back to active camera, as you can see, it's going to be in front of the camera. So if you're outside of the field, now you've successfully used the camera as positional reference for your objects. If you want to move it further, you can do that simply by changing these values, sliding it around until it's positioned around where you want it. Next up, I'm going to show you how to place something in your scene with a very specific position. In my case, I want my text standing right here on the concrete in front of the statue. Now that we're back in our replay and I know where I want my text, I'm going to move the camera over to this position. I want my text standing right here. I'm going to find the exact position where I want my text to be. That's right where I want my text to be. I'm going to click the start and stop recording key for only CinematicsBuddy. You don't need to record video for this. Now we go back into After Effects. We're going to click File, Scripts, Run Script File. We click CinematicsBuddy After Effects. Then we're going to navigate to our recording again. And as you can see, there's a new CinematicsBuddy path. We're going to run this CinematicsBuddy path. We're going to click on this. And as you can see, it adds all the layers as before. We can delete these as we already have them. Now it's important that we keep the camera though, because that's what's going to tell us where we want to place our text. So I'm going to disable the camera. Then I'm going to click P on the camera, click Control C on your keyboard with the position selected. We can click on our text layer and hit Control V. And as you can see, it placed the text exactly where we placed our camera when we did the recording. Now, if you look through, you can see that it's placed perfectly right on the statue. I'm going to show you how to do parenting with the nulls that we have from CinematicsBuddy. So I'm going to click on this to unhide all the shy layers again. Now, if I want the text to stay right on the car here, even if the car is moving, what I'm going to do is unseparate the dimensions for the position by right-clicking here on the position, hitting the separate dimensions. As you can see now, the 3 turned into 1 property instead. Now I'm going to find the position of this car in the nulls. I'm going to enable 1 by 1, and as you can see, it's the top one. So I know that this is the one I want to reference. Now I'm going to click P on my keyboard. I'm going to right click again on the positions here and hitting separate dimensions again to turn these 3 properties into 1 instead. For convenience sake, I'm going to take this pick whip next to the position for the text, and I'm going to drag that onto the position for the car. The position for text now moved to the car. It's very big though, so if I turn down the scale a little, if I want to move this upwards, you're not going to be able to change the position because it's linked to the position of the car, but I can still change the anchor point. You can bring up the anchor point by pressing A on your keyboard. You can move it upwards a bit without changing the position itself. If the car starts driving, the text is still going to follow the car. In this example, the car starts driving outside of the camera's viewpoint, but if you look at the position for the text, you can see that later in the timeline it changes to the same position as the car. Okay, next up I'm going to show you how to parent with particular. I'm going to start by right clicking on our timeline again, hitting new, solid. Make sure that the resolution of this is the same as your composition. Now that we have this effect, I'm going to open emitter at the top here. I'm going to enable keyframes for the position. Now I'm going to click U on my keyboard, which is going to bring up all the keyframe properties. I'm going to disable the keyframe again because I don't want to animate the position. I'm going to select the car again. I'm going to click P on my keyboard. I'm going to drag the pick whip over to the position of the car. They're just going to emit particles from the position of the car, regardless of where the car is placed, always following the car. Next, I'm going to show how to parent with Element 3D. I'm going to open the group 1, open Particle Replicator, again enable the position for XY, but also Z, because the position is separated into 2 different properties. Then I'm going to click U on my keyboard again to bring up the keyframe properties. Then I'm going to disable the keyframes again. I'm going to select the car layer again. I'm going to right click where it says position. For this, I recommend separating the dimensions again. This is a bit tricky. So for XY, you can see that there are 2 different properties in one, and we need to reference 2 different ones. I'm going to start off by holding Alt on my keyboard and then clicking the stopwatch next to the position XY. Then I'm going to type in a square bracket, open square bracket. I'm going to use the pick whip here and drag that onto the X position. Then I'm going to hit a comma on my keyboard. Then I'm going to take the pick whip again, select the Y position, and then I'm going to type in a closed square bracket. And it's going to reference those 2 separately using what's called an array. For the position Z, it's going to be really straightforward because there's only one property referencing one property. I'm going to take this pick whip, and drag it over to the Z position, and as you can see, the position of the element 3D should now be the same as the position for the car. We can check this by just adding a model inside of element 3D, and as you can see, it's going to be placed in the same position as our car. Last but not least, I'm going to show you how to make something in 2D space follow the position of 3D. This might sound weird, but essentially what it's going to do is make something move on a flat plane while keeping the same position as it would be in 3D space. For this example, I'm going to use the Fusion logo. We're going to unhide the shy layers like this, and we know that this is our car layer from before. So I'm going to hold Alt on my keyboard, then click on the stopwatch next to the position for our logo, type src equals, I'm going to take the pick whip here and then drag it onto the layer. Then I'm going to type in a semicolon at the end, enter on my keyboard, and I'm going to type in src.toComp parentheses square bracket 0, 0, 0 like this. And now when we click out, you can see that it positions in the same position as the car, remaining in 2D space, which is really useful for effects like shine, which only has 2 properties for the position. Alright, now on to the next part.
In this part of the tutorial, I'll be showing you how to time-remap the CinematicsBuddy camera. Doing this will let you have more control over the motion of your 3D scene, so for things like doing text animation, particular movement, or motion blur. Let's start with making a new composition. Let's drag in the cinematic. I'll just quickly time-remap this. Once you have your time-remap, pre-compose this and select move all attributes into the new composition, and also select adjust composition duration. Now jump into the pre-comp, import the camera like you would normally. Okay, once you have your camera inside of your composition, you will have to select your time-remap layer, go to scripts and load the time-remap CinematicsBuddy script, which will automatically time-remap all of the values of the camera and the null objects. Okay, now we will have to align the camera with the cinematic. So to do that, let's hide the nulls. We will try to align the goal text with the goal in the cinematic. Okay, and that's pretty much all you have to do to time-remap the camera. For how you can use this in edits, quick example. The camera is already time-wrapped, text motion won't be affected. Another thing you can do is enable the motion blur, or make sure you are on the classic 3D renderer. So now the camera motion is actually reacting. You can also use motion blur on things like particular. Once you have your particles set up, you can just click on the motion blur button. It's reacting the same way the text is. So that's pretty much all to time-wrapping cameras.
Hey guys, I'm Tornado from Fusion, and without further ado, let's get into the next part, Element 3D setup. So now that we understand the basics of CinematicsBuddy and 3D positioning, it's time that we learn to incorporate actual objects into our scenes. The plugin for this is called Element 3D, and it's by Video Copilot. And to get it, we're going to go to Layer, New, Solid. Just make sure it's the size of your composition, and we'll just call it Element 3D. And now over here in our effects and presets, we want to open this up and search for element, and then we can drag it onto the layer. Element 3D can create meshes from text layers, mask layers, OBJ sequences, or just OBJ files, as well as Cinema 4D files. For now though, we're just going to focus on using After Effects text layers and also masks to create our 3D meshes. For text, it's simple. We're going to go layer, new text, and we can type anything in. I'm just going to type in tutorial. Now to get this into Element 3D, what we're going to do is click on our Element 3D layer and then go to the custom layers and then click on custom text and masks. And then on path layer 1 where it says none, we can click on it and add the tutorial layer that we just made. Then we can head on into scene setup and then we click on the extrude button. And there we go. Now for logos or anything you want to get a mask from, it's a slightly different process. So here I've got the Fusion logo. We can grab the pen tool and start tracing around each shape. You can see that it's actually not connected. So this shape here is not connected to this shape in the middle, and this one's also separate. So we're going to make 3 different mask layers. Before we start tracing it, I'm going to get you to duplicate it. This is just because when you start making a mask, the rest of the logo will disappear and you'll have a hard time tracing the rest of it. Now we're going to press G to get the pen tool, or you could also just click up here. And then we can just start tracing each part of the logo. With the pen tool still selected, we could just continue tracing around the next part. Right, and now we can do our third mask. quickly, I just wanted to note that if you have a logo that actually has a hole in the middle or a hollow part like this, then what you're going to want to do is once you've traced around the outside, you actually want to create another mask in the middle. And then if we press M, the middle one, and we want to set this to subtract. Now back to the Fusion logo, we're going to follow almost the same steps as before. Custom layers, custom text and masks, and instead here, we'll just select the Fusion logo. We're going to make sure it's the one that has the masks on it. We can now delete our tracing layer. If we go into scene setup now, same thing, we can just press extrude and there's our logo. If you want different parts of your logo to have different colors, for instance, maybe I want this part of the logo to be red, this part blue, this part green. It's a bit of a janky way to do it. We have to separate this into 3 different layers. Press Ctrl D twice. We now have 3 layers because I want to separate it into 3 different parts. On the bottom layer, let's delete both of these masks. And now this layer is just this piece. So on this next one, we can delete mask 1 and mask 3. So now we're just left with the middle piece. And on our final layer, we can delete the first 2 masks, and we're now left with this. If we go back to Element 3D to our custom text layers, we can add each of these layers here as different path layers. Press extrude one more time, and this time we change the path to custom path 2. Press extrude another time, and this time we make a custom path 3. We have all our pieces of the logo, they're just not necessarily in the right spot, but you can move them. We can apply different colors to each of these. I could make this one red by going into the material settings, changing the color. I can make the middle one blue, and I could make the other one green. You know, I could do whatever I want to these. They're separate objects now, which is really helpful. So yeah, the principle is the same with text. You can duplicate the text, you can make a new line of text. All you have to do in Element 3D is add them both in as custom text layers. Using our knowledge of 3D positioning from earlier on in the tutorial, we can now position our text exactly where we want it in the field, and we're ready to go. Next, I'll hand it over to Michos, who's going to cover importing meshes from Cinema 4D and OBJ files.
In this part, I'll show you how you can find many 3D game models and add them to your scene like we do in Rocket Universe. For a very long time, I've been using a website called the Models Resource, which has a huge collection of many game models submitted by different people. Now, once you're on the website, you can search for anything you want and then pick whichever model you like. After extracting the zip folder, you should see the texture file and different 3D models. The one we want to use for Element 3D is OBJ. If the OBJ file is missing, you can use Cinema 4D to open them in Element or convert them in any 3D program. I'll show you how to do it through Cinema 4D first. Once you're in Cinema 4D, go ahead and import one of the other 3D files. After that, you can just save the project file. Now the project we just saved will be compatible with Element 3D. Then we will go into the scene setup, click import, and select either the OBJ file or the C4D file we just did. Sometimes the models might have overlapping meshes, so to fix this we can go into this view, which will open every single mesh from the model, and now you will have to find the ones that are duplicated or are on top of each other. After your model is ready, you can exit the setup view. I'll try putting the model next to the car. Since I already have the car null, I'll use its position. We can see that the model is still not exactly on the ground. To position it better, we will have to go back to the scene setup, select the model, and just try to align it with the middle line. So now it's actually staying on the ground. Then on the y-axis, put a 0 in, so it will be synced with the floor. Then I'll just move it so it's not on the car but next to it. Let's see how it looks like in motion.
Now that we have our 3D models tracked into the scene, it's time that we make them look good with some materials. So once we're in Element 3D, we're going to click on the Scene Materials tab and then right click in the empty space to add a new material. We can right click on the material and press rename, and we'll just call it tutorial. Then we can drag onto our text and we see that nothing changes, and that's because currently it's still a default material. Now once we click on the drop down, we can scroll down and see the textures tab. We can see that there's 7 types of inputs for textures in Element 3D. The diffuse input controls the color of the material surface. The glossiness input defines the irregularities and imperfections on the material surface. Depending on how bright or dark different pixels on the glossiness map are, it controls kind of how shiny or how matte the material is. The reflectivity input controls the intensity of the environmental reflections that appear on the surface. The illumination input controls which parts of the material surface are emissive and will produce light. The normal bump creates the illusion of lighting on bumps and dents in the material surface. The occlusion occlusion channel is used to fine-tune the amount of ambient occlusion on the material surface, which in short controls how much light hits each point of the object, primarily creating contact shadows. The environment input allows you to add a specific environment map to a material, allowing it to ignore the default environment map of the scene. While these are all useful to know, the most commonly used ones are typically diffuse, glossiness or roughness as it's known in other 3D programs, reflectivity, and normal bump. To make our material from scratch, I recommend heading over to websites such as textures.com or polyhaven.com where you can access free textures. You can even use free textures from Quixelbridge. I'm going to head on over to polyhaven.com where I found this brushed concrete texture. It's also important to note that if you've downloaded a texture and some of the maps are in .exr or anything except for PNG or JPEG, they may not work in Elements, so I definitely recommend converting them to PNG or JPEG. Now that we've got our material downloaded, we can go ahead and apply all the different maps we downloaded to our material. We can click on each of these channels by clicking on None Set, and now we can load a texture for the diffuse channel. All we have to do is navigate to wherever you downloaded or installed textures to. If you get this pop-up, don't worry about it. It just means the texture is really high res and it's downscaled it for you. We can click OK, and then we can go and add the rest of our maps. Alright, so all I've added is a diffuse, glossiness, and normal bump just by navigating to the same file directory. You can see the texture's not looking too good. If we click on the extrusion model and we scroll down until we get to UV mapping, we can actually change the UV repeat. If we turn this up to something like 2, see the texture's a little bit more high res. What this has pretty much done is it's gotten our texture and it's pretty much tiled it on either side twice. Now if you want it even higher res, you can make this a higher number. Now back to the texture input channels, you can play around with each of these inputs to get the desired look. For instance, on the normal bump, there's lots of settings, but the main one we want to play with is the amount. This changes the strength of the normal map. If we turn it down a bit, it might be a little bit more realistic with the lighting. Play around with it until you get a look that you like. Same with the diffuse map. We can change a lot here with the contrast and the actual colors. So we can completely desaturate our texture or add some more saturation to it. We can also change the gamma and the brightness to control how dark or how bright it is. Now, the next step with materials is to have a look at bevels. So if we click on the extrusion model and scroll all the way to the top, we can see there's an option for bevel copies where you can do up to 5 different bevels. So I'll just do 2, and you're probably wondering, well, what is a bevel? You can see now it's actually added a second material slot to our texture, and now this white texture is kind of clipping through our existing texture. Click on the second bevel. What we can do is click on the new texture, scroll all the way to the top, and we can play around with these settings here. The extrude controls the depth of it, expand edges controls how thick it is, and Z offset controls the actual depth of it in relation to the other one. The other settings are also really important and we'll have a play around with them, but first let's kind of get this bevel into a better position. Now see, we have quite an interesting look going on. We can play around with the other settings now. We can actually control the roundness of the edges of the bevel by changing the segments. We can make it really smooth or a complete sharp cutoff like that. And again, you can do these same things in the original material. We can apply whatever texture we want to this new bevel that we've created. For the sake of the tutorial, let's just duplicate our original texture and put it on. And you can kind of see the creative potential of what you can do with some bevels. And you can play around, you can add multiple bevel copies, you can play around with the materials, download some more materials, and create some very interesting text for your scenes. And once you're happy with your material, we can move on to lighting. Now, in terms of lighting, there's many ways to light your objects, but first, let's focus on default After Effects lights. We'll go to Layer, New, and click on Light. There's 4 different types of lights, but for now, let's just keep a point light with 100 intensity and don't worry about the rest of the settings. You can see instantly it might have changed the lighting pretty dramatically. Now, ensuring that our toggle mask and shape path visibility is enabled, we can hopefully see where our light is. As you can see, we can move the light around in 3D space just like we could with our 2D objects earlier on in the tutorial. Now, the aim with these light layers is to match the lighting of your cinematic to make the text look truly integrated into the scene. Now, an easy way to truly match the lighting of the cinematic is to go into Rocket League, into the map where you recorded the cinematic, and find where the light source is actually coming from. The light is coming from the sun up here. We can tell that's the main light in the scene because the shadows are skewed a bit to the side, matching exactly where the sun's coming from. So we want to try emulate that with our text. What we can actually do is start flying up towards the sun. What we can do, press F6 to open the Dollycam console and type CB convert units with that exact capitalization. It says it's copied all these coordinates to our clipboard. Now, since these units were copied to our clipboard, we can just press Ctrl V into a notepad or any text editor, and we can get the exact coordinates for a wide variety of platforms. Obviously, what we need is After Effects. What we can do is grab the coordinates of this light one at a time and paste it onto our light. Now we can see the light is shining primarily on the right side of the text, which is matching the rest of the world. Now, if you don't want to go through all that effort, when you do add your light to the scene, you can simply just move it manually over to the side. But this is the truly accurate way to do it. But we can see the text is kind of not looking that good. The front's a little bit too dark. So to make this text look better, it might be better to approach this with a 3-point lighting setup, although still keeping the sunlight as our main light. Just adding a few fill and key lights to kind of illuminate the front of the text a little bit more. So again, we can go to layer, new light, add in a point light. This one I'm just going to call it the key light, kind of move it into place. I'm kind of offsetting it a little bit to the side, and then on our key light we can double click A on our keyboard and go to the light options. Here we can turn down the intensity because it's a little bit strong at the moment. There we go, that's looking pretty good, maybe a tiny bit less. I'm going to add a fill light as well, which pretty much fills in these kind of dull sides here, and to do so you can duplicate the key layer by pressing Ctrl D and then just moving it to the side, and then again we can control the intensity of this. Now we have some pretty well lit text, but there is another method for lighting, and it's within Element 3D. We can head on over to render settings and then lighting, and here we can click on none next to add lighting and select any of these presets, and you see once you click on them it drastically changes the lighting. Now it's very bright, some of these, but if we turn off the point light and our key light and our fill lights, we can kind of get a better idea of what they're doing. Now if these are way too strong for you can go into the additional lighting settings and turn this multiply down. So if you like the look of something like this, you can also change the rotation to kind of get those orange highlights and those blue tones hitting on the right side of the text wherever you want it to hit. Now it's important to note as well that there are different types of lights, which we briefly talked about at the start. To have a look at that again, we can double click on any of our lights, and we chose point lights, but you can choose spot or parallel or ambient lights. Point lights are just honestly the easiest to use. The way they work is wherever you place them, it just acts like a light bulb in real life. It illuminates light from any angle, so 3D objects placed anywhere around it are going to be lit. Now if we choose a spotlight, it actually creates a bit of a cone, and this light right now isn't even illuminating this text because the cone isn't aimed at it. But if we click R, we can rotate the light. We can make it shine on our text like that. We can see a little bit of a highlight there, and again we can double click A, play around with the cone angle, make it much wider. You might personally like that as you get a bit more control over the light. Sometimes they're very tricky for beginners to use because it's kind of confusing to know whether the angle of the cone is hitting the text or not. So that's why I recommend just using point lights if you're just starting off. There's also ambient lights. Now an ambient light doesn't even matter the position of it. It kind of acts as like a sun. It's illuminating everything in the scene. We can change the intensity of it to make it really super bright, or we could just have it something subtle. Maybe if you just want to touch up the brightness of the scene a little bit, you can do something like that with the ambient light. Parallel light is the light I use the least. Pretty much it just shoots light in a straight line. Similar to a spotlight, it shoots it in a defined area, so it can be useful for more of a controlled beam of light. For the most part, you're going to find point lights and spotlights the easiest to use. That just about wraps up the lighting section.
So now that we've gone over Element 3D and lighting, we're going to cover compositing. Compositing is the process of making objects fit the scene. The key ingredients to making objects fit the scene are the following: depth, contrast and color matching, bloom, and compression. In order to get started, it's important to know about something called passes. Passes are the core assets to compositing. They allow us to control various effects in the right parts of our footage by rendering with different output methods. Basically like a container for different channel values. The main pass that we're going to use for this tutorial is called depth map. Essentially what a depth map does is that it displays the distance to every point on screen with grayscale values. And using luma mats, we have the ability to make a layer invisible in the places where our depth map is black and visible where it's white, or the opposite if that's what you need. To utilize a depth map for Rocket League, we need something called Reshade. Reshade is a post-processing injector for various different video games. You can download the Reshade at reshade.me. Okay, now that we have Reshade installed, we can click home on our keyboard to bring up the menu and search for the effect called display depth at the top here. Click it by pressing F9. You can enable and disable the display depth. Now let's skip to before the path starts again. Then we're gonna hit F9 on our keyboard, and then we're gonna start recording. Then we're gonna stop the recording. Now we're gonna take this video, we're gonna drag it into our timeline, hit Ctrl-Shift-O on my keyboard. I'm gonna type in 50. I'm gonna move this clip back and forth until it's placed in the exact same position as our main footage. I have a pretty good alignment. I'm gonna change the opacity back to 100. If you remember what I said previously, everything white is visible and everything black is gonna be hidden. We're gonna add the effect called levels. I'm gonna take this knob to the right here and then move it to the left until everything I want to be behind the logo is completely white and everything in front is grayscale or black. So I'm gonna then take the left knob here and move that to the left until everything I want in front of the logo to be completely black. It's also smart to keep some distance in between the two knobs to avoid what's known as clipping. We can hide a layer, and then we're going to look into the two key methods to referencing depth maps. The two key methods for referencing depth maps are set mats and track mats. Track mats are on the layer in the timeline. If we right click here, hover over columns, and then make sure that parent and link is enabled. If we then put our text layer under our depth map layer, you can see that this selection box will appear. If we click this and then select Luma Mat, it's going to tell the layer that everything that's white in the depth map is going to be visible, and everything that's black in the depth map is going to be hidden. You can see that it is in fact going to be behind, just as we want. If you want it to be the opposite, you can click here and you can click Luma Inverted Map so that it's only visible in the black areas. Now, there are some downsides to using track mats. Let's say you want to add a glow to this. As you can see, the glow isn't gonna go over here. I'm gonna show you how to do this with pre-composing. So in order to pre-compose, we need a duplicate of the camera. I'm gonna duplicate the camera, then I'm gonna hold Control on my keyboard to select the text layer and the display depth layer. I'm gonna right click, pre-compose, I'm going to click OK on my keyboard, and now if we place deep glow on this pre-composition, you can see that the glow does in fact go over the foreground. Next up, I'm going to show set mats, which is an effect that you can use and achieve basically the exact same thing. For this example, we actually need to pre-compose again. I can add the effect called set mat. The key to using set mats is making sure that everything is always the same size and resolution. So if I go into the first selection box, which is where it takes the mat from, I'm going to select the display depth layer. Then in the second box, I gotta choose effects and masks so that it does account for the effect I applied, which is levels. In the third box, I'm going to select luminance. And as you can see, it's already being placed behind the foreground elements. What's great about the set mat effect is that you can apply effects afterwards without the mat being the last chain in the process. It does in fact go over in front, just like we saw before with pre-composing the track mat. Next up is color contrast matching. Color contrast matching is really important to make your object look natural in the scene. It consists of distributing highlights and shadows accordingly to however your background footage suggests. When it comes to contrast matching, it's important to take reference from something in the same depth area of your object. For both color and contrast matching, I recommend an effect called CC Toner. Let's add this effect to our layer. Then I'm going to take the color picker for our shadows, and then I'm going to click on the darkest area in the same depth as our object under the statue here. Onto midtones, I'm going to click this and click around here. For the highlights, I'm going to find the brightest highlights in this area, which would probably be around here. Now, because I want some of the colors to remain, I'm not going to keep this at 0%, maybe around 50%. Adjust this to your liking. Last but not least is compression. What's going to make this as realistic as possible is the compression. So I'm going to add lens blur. Then I'm going to change this to my liking, and then I'm also going to add a bit of noise. I set the strength to maybe 5. I'm going to put this above the camera lens blur. The last part is adding your color correction, which is going to make everything blend together even more. So if you're using Magic Bullet looks, adding diffusion is always going to blend your 3D together really well. Okay, so now that I have my color correction enabled, you can see that everything blends together really well. And using this, you can actually change the properties even more if you see that something should be a bit different. Alright, so that's the final result for the compositing section.
Next, we'll be covering matte shadows and matte reflections. We'll be covering how to get ambient occlusion and reflections on our 3D object, as well as using a matte shadow and matte reflection plane to make the shadows and reflections affect our source footage. First, we'll go over matte shadow, but before we do that, let's discuss how ambient occlusion works. In 3D, ambient occlusion is a rendering technique that simulates soft shadows through subtle variations in lighting. To find this in Element 3D, we want to go to our Element 3D settings, and click on Render Settings, and click on Ambient Occlusion, and then here we can tick Enable AO. Now initially it's not doing much, but if we turn up the intensity to 50, you can see the shadows that it's creating. Now it looks pretty rough right now, but you can turn up the samples. Now as with any 3D technique, subtlety is key. This looks obviously fake and generated, so you want to turn down the intensity. This is going to change based on your scene and your environment. Find whatever number looks good that creates a realistic shadow without making it look too forced. The settings such as the radius radius and the distribution change how wide the ambient occlusion is, and the gamma can be used in conjunction with the intensity to kind of get the exact darkness that you want. So I'm quite happy with this, and now it's time to use the matte shadow plane to truly make this object feel integrated in the scene. To do so, let's head up to our scene setup, and here we can add a plane. This is going to be our matte shadow plane. We can scale it up, and then we're going to head into this drop down menu on the plane model and then click on its texture. If we scroll all the way down, we can see there is an option for matte shadow. We're going to enable that, and we're going to notice that our plane has now disappeared. That's exactly what we want, because we don't want that plane visible in our shot. We just want to use it as something to display only shadows. So we're going to click OK and head back to After Effects. Now instantly, because we've already set up our ambient occlusion, we can see now it's rendering shadows on the floor where the matte shadow plane was. Matte shadow planes are not only used for just ambient occlusion, but you can use them for actual long shadow rays as well. Now with a light in our scene, we can use the matte shadow plane to cast shadows from the object onto the floor. So with our light in the scene, we want to double click A while selecting the point light to open the light settings. We want to make sure that cast shadows is on. We can keep our shadow darkness on 100 and our shadow diffusion to 0. In Element 3D, we want to head to our render settings and then our shadows tab. If we click enable, we'll notice that nothing's happened. This is because we're using a point light. The default Element 3D shadow mapping only works for spotlights, parallel lights, and advanced lights. So now I'm going to go into ray traced, and we can see that we can see our shadow, but it's very grainy. So we're going to turn up the samples here, something like 8 perhaps. Again, we can double click A on our point light and adjust our diffusion and our shadow darkness to get the look that we want. And with that, we're pretty much covered on matte shadow. Next, we'll get into matte reflections. But first, let's discuss just normal reflections on our 3D objects. First of all, we're going to want to go to our footage layer. I'm going to click Ctrl D on my keyboard to duplicate it. Now on the new layer that's created, I'm going to press enter and name it texture. Then I'm going to right click, time, and then freeze frame. I'm now going to hide this layer and move it to the bottom of my composition. So with our frozen layer here named texture, we're going to go into Element 3D, then we're going to head into custom layers, custom texture maps, and on layer 1 where it says none, we're going to click on that and select our texture layer. We're going to head into scene setup, then we're going to click on environment, and on the drop down we're going to click on our custom layer 1, which now has our Rocket League footage layer there. Instantly you can see the reflections working and it's changing how the text looks, and if we click OK, we can see how this looks in After Effects. So instantly it looks much more integrated into the scene. The colors match way more than the default lighting. That actually looks really great. If your reflection looks a bit rough, you can go into custom layers. Next to where we added our texture, we can click on source and change it to effects and mask. You can then go onto your texture layer, which I'll make visible just for now. And in our effects and presets, we can add Gaussian blur. Here you can increase the blur, and this will make the reflections much smoother and less sharp. Now again, we have even more control over this reflection. If we head down to the render settings, then physical environment, and then rotate environment, we can rotate our environment layer in all 3 axes. You can click show in background to see the current direction that it's facing, and here you can rotate it and it'll change how the text looks. For me though, I'm going to keep my rotation set to 0 as I already think it looks very good. Now that we've covered reflections on our 3D object, it's time to go over the matte reflection plane. In our scene setup, we're going to want to click on our plane model and then on its texture, scroll all the way down to where we enabled matte shadow, and this time we're going to also tick matte reflection. Our plane is invisible. You can either right click where the plane would be in your preview or just right click up here. In reflect mode, we'll go to mirror surface, and we can see that the reflection is already working. And now in Rocket League, we can see the reflection. Now with the matte reflection, there's a few techniques we can use to composite it a little bit better. So the first technique we can use to control the reflection is, again, on our texture for our plane model, we can play with the glossiness settings. The lower the glossiness, the less sharp the reflection is. Something like this might be a little bit more realistic. Now I've quickly downloaded a gravel concretey texture to match the floor of the map in Rocket League, and I'm going to use this texture to show how you can adjust the reflection even more. So on our plane model, on our normal bump, we want to load a texture, and for me it's in this gravel concrete folder, and I'm just going to click on my normal. Now we're going to turn down the intensity. Now you can see our normal map is adding some distortion to our reflection. The more intense the normal map, the more distorted it gets. For now, let's just do something small just to get a little bit of variation in our reflection. If we click OK, the reflection's looking much better. We can also touch this up by heading into the render settings of Element 3D and then clicking on reflection. Here we can up the resolution. Now a final tip that I personally like to use with my matte reflections is to actually duplicate the Element 3D layer. And on the top one, we're going to head up to scene setup, and here we're going to disable matte reflections, but we'll keep on matte shadow. Now on this bottom Element 3D layer, we're going to head to scene setup, and here on our plane model, we're going to scroll down and disable matte shadow. Bottom one is just the text and the reflection, and the top one is just the text and the shadow. On the one with the reflection, we're going to search in the effects and presets for gradient. Here we can change our gradient layer to our Rocket League layer, not our texture, our Rocket League layer, the one that's moving. If I zoom in and I play around with the transition completeness, it's using the darker values of the source footage, which in this case is our Rocket League layer, to pretty much eliminate what's visible on our Element 3D layer. We can turn this up to something like this and use the softness to just soften those edges a little bit. And now we have a reflection that's much more integrated, especially as it gets lower and further away from the text. And there you go, that's pretty much all you need to know about matte shadows and matte reflections. Next, we're going to cover animation, and in Element 3D, there's many methods to animate your objects. So the first type of animation is the most simple. It's just keyframing. So for instance, in this scene, I have Element 3D set up with two custom layers. One layer that says animation, one layer that says tutorial. I've both set them up in scene setup in group 1. Now, if I keyframe the position of group 1, by clicking on the stopwatch next to the position XY, and then I can click U on my layer to see my keyframe. I scrub to a different position and I change one of these values. It'll create a new keyframe. And now my text will be animated from point A to point B. Now, when you keyframe something in these group 1 settings, it will affect every object in that group. So notice how it's affecting both the animation and the tutorial layers. Next, let's cover auxiliary channels. So I'm just going to delete these keyframes. I'm going to head up to scene setup. You can see that my scene is set up with my two models. This one is the tutorial text and this one is the animation text. On the animation text, we can click on it and scroll down till we get to auxiliary animation. Now we can assign this text to use channel 1, and on our tutorial text, we can assign this to use channel 2. And within our group 1 settings, there is an aux channels drop down. If we click on that and open channel 1, you can see when I change the position of this, it only affects the animation text. Same with channel 2, this will only affect the tutorial text. So you can use this to get some pretty interesting animations. For instance, I can create keyframes for both of these, go back to the start, make the animation one slide in from the right, and make the tutorial slide in from the left. And here's the result. Now, as well as the auxiliary channels, we can also use multi-object. So auxiliary channels allow us to animate each object separately. But now let's get into multi-object, where we can break down the objects even further. So again, we're going to head over to group 1 and then in multi-object and then enable multi-object. Now, this has given us way more settings than before. And in here, you can see you can animate each letter individually. You can give it random rotation. You could rotate just one axis like that. You can change the position of each letter, or if you're looking for something chaotic, even adjust the noise. So here as well, we can add a keyframe for the rotation of the letters like so, and use this in conjunction with our auxiliary channel animation. And just like that, we can get some really interesting animations. Now I'm going to delete these keyframes once again, and now we're going to go over animation engine. So I'm just going to close these group 1 settings and then head on down to animation engine. Here, if we enable this, it doesn't do anything initially. If we play with the animation, we can see the text is now flying away. It's important to note that if I had not enabled multi-object, this would look completely different. We're going to keep that enabled, and we're actually going to open our group 2 settings and our particle replicator for group 2. Here we can see our start group is group 1 and our finish group is group 2. So what does this mean? Pretty much when the animation is at 0, it's going to be at its start. So the position where the animation will start is going to be taken from the position of group 1. And when it finishes at 100%, it's going to be taken from the position of group 2. I'm happy with the group 1 position. So I'm going to swap these around, make it start at group 2 and end at group 1. I actually don't mind this flying in from the bottom, but let's just play around with it a little bit. And if I set it to maybe minus 2000, it should fly in from the top of the screen, like so. You can even make it a bit higher. You can adjust the randomness to make the letters come in a random order instead of coming in from left to right. You can adjust the smoothness to make the letters come in more together or more individually. And we can change this from directional. We can use radial, random, uniform. Radial looks quite different. You can see there's a bit more of a bend with that animation compared to the directional. Uniform pretty much moves the text all together. Random moves the letters in random order, which you can achieve with directional and just by cranking up the randomness. And shape order is pretty similar to the directional animation. Each letter landing, it ends quite sharply. They're not really eased out. So we can actually change the ease in here. So we can select ease out and this will pretty much fix that. If you're not happy with your animation, you can change the seed to get a completely randomized look. I'm just going to keep it on default though. And in the radial options, we can change where the center of the circle is, because the text is kind of being distorted in a circular shape. We can change that center kind of to the left a bit more, or up and down. There's lots of different looks you can achieve here. You can even change the depth of it. For now, I'll just keep it on default. I think it looks fine. And we'll just preview it to see our final result. Now let's talk about source text animation. So what that means is we can click on our actual text layers here and we can animate them. So first, let's make them visible so we can see what we're actually doing. So here we'll click on the drop down on the tutorial text, and here there's an animate button. When we click on that, we see there's lots of options with things we can animate. For instance, the tracking is the space between the text. So we can set a keyframe, the text to be really spaced by clicking the stopwatch to make a keyframe, drag it all the way to the left, and here set it to 0. So you can see the source text and the 3D text both get animated here. Some other cool ones you can play with here is the position. So we can set the position down like that, and then in advanced, instead of using square, we can use ramp up. Here we can maybe set it even a little lower, and I'll hide it so you can see the 3D. We can play with the offset to bring it back into place, or even the start. Get some very cool looks here. And obviously with the source text animation, there's so many things you can play with, and we don't have time to cover all of them, but feel free to have a play around and explore them for yourself. And with that being said, that covers the entire animation section.
This is Poofers, and I'll be going over OBJ sequences. Now this section goes over how to export an OBJ sequence from Blender and Cinema 4D, and how you can import those sequences into Element 3D. Now I really only recommend using OBJ sequences when you have a simple 3D animation that does not interact with moving elements in your footage. In Blender we have a simple clock animation here that I made previously. We are going to export this into Element 3D. So before we export this, we have to make sure that every single piece of our mesh is a different material, because that is how Element 3D reads meshes. I'm going to go up to File, go down to Export, hover over this, all the way down to Wavefront OBJ. Now depending on which version you have, it may say Legacy, it may not. First, before I do anything, I'm going to make a new folder in the location of my choosing. I'm going to call this Blender Demo. Open the folder and click animation. Now when you select animation, it will create a separate OBJ file for every single frame that you have. Now once I have everything selected, I'm going to click export OBJ, and we're going to give it a little bit of time. Over in After Effects, I already have my track. I can go to scene setup. This is very important. In order to import the OBJ sequence, you cannot click this button. You need to go to File, Import 3D Sequence, and I'm only gonna click the first one and it'll automatically import your sequence. Alright, so here are your 4 main controls. All of these are pretty self-explanatory. Now, playback speed is the only one that really depends on the frame rate at which you exported. So if I played it back at 50%, you can see now that it's playing at 50% speed along with my cine, which would just make more sense when time-remapping. So moving on from Blender, we're going to be in Cinema 4D next with how to export it there. Now we are in Cinema 4D with a little bit different animation. Before we export, also again remember that your meshes have to be different materials so you can hide different shadow planes and whatever you need. The exporting process is a little bit different in Cinema 4D. So we're gonna go up to File, Export, Wavefront OBJ. We're just interested in animation. Depending on your frame range you want, I'm going to do all frames from 0 to 400, which is my full animation here, and I'm going to click OK. This is a little bit different from Blender since we have to pick a folder after we click OK. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to go back to my location of choice and I'm going to make another folder. I'm going to select this folder and it's going to do the exact same thing as Blender did. It's going to create a separate OBJ file for every single frame. So I'm going to click save and it's going to start. And again, I'm only going to click the first frame in the sequence. So we only want to see the egg. This is where I want the plane to be separated, so I can just turn it off through this material. Now you no longer have to see the plane and we only have the egg showing. I can find the start of my animation by scrubbing through here, probably around this frame, so I can trim it there. Then I can choose where it starts by just moving the start of this clip. There we go. it shatters, and we have our animation successfully imported. Of course, you need to do a little extra compositing, shadows and lighting and all that. This is how you import your animation. That wraps up this part of the tutorial. Alright, on to the next.
In this part, I'll be showing you how to use particular, optical flares, and how to do sky replacement. Here's a little scene I've made, combining all of them. I'll start with particular. It's a very powerful plugin and I've used it in almost all of my edits. To use it, create a new solid and add the particular effect to it. Now we can start positioning our particles. We can do this in the emitter window. You'll start by moving the particles up in the y-axis and then changing the emitter type to box. We will change the emitter size from linked to individual. Now adjust the size for each axis. We can also hold shift so the values change faster. We can add more particles by increasing the particles per second. The particles are moving very fast right now. We can change it by adjusting the velocity. I'll just put something around 10 here. Once you've positioned your particles correctly, we can move on into the particle window. Here, we will be adjusting the particle size, opacity, and other stuff. To make the particles look more dynamic, I'm gonna change the size random and the opacity random. Here's how it looks now. The particles just pop into the scene with no fading, which makes them look unnatural. We can make them fade in using the opacity over life window. Here you can select one of the presets. I usually use this one. Right now the particles are not visible at the start of the scene. To make them spawn instantly, we can either move the solid or go into emission extras, turn up the pre-run percentage. You can also turn on the motion blur right here. This will make the particles look more real. You can also change the type of the particle. There is a lot of options to choose from, so just use whatever you like. Now I'll show you how you can make foggy looking particles that can make your scene look more atmospheric. I'll be using the cloudlet particle type for this. Duplicate your particle layer and in the particle type change it to cloudlet. Now you'll have to change the size to something bigger. Now change the opacity to a very low amount. And that's pretty much it. Here's how it looks together. If you want the particles to move in a specific direction, you can go into the physics tab. Here you can change the gravity of the particles. If you change the physics model from air to bounce, you can make the particles bounce off different layers in the scene or make them disappear once they hit the layer. To do this, go into the bounce window and for the floor layer, just select the floor from the CinematicsBuddy guide. If you go into the collision effect, you can change it from bounce to slide, stick or kill. If you change it to kill, the particles will be disappearing whenever they hit the layer. I won't be going much into detail here, but the aux system window basically spawns additional particles as a trail for the main particles. And in the last window, you can just move the particles. Now using the depth map, I will mask the particles so they don't go over the car. Take the depth layer and put it over your particle layers. Now go into the particles layer and change the matte into Luma matte. And right away, you'll see that the particles aren't appearing here. Now I'll show you how to make the particles follow cars or the ball. Find the null object that you want to use and then press P to reveal its position. Then select all of them, right click, go to keyframe assistant and convert expression to keyframes. We will also want to uncheck the separate dimensions. We will make a new light and call it emitter. We will copy the position from the null object into the light. The easiest way to do this is just grab the parent tool and put it on the null object's position. Then right click on position, go to keyframe assistant and convert to expression. After the light is ready, we can just duplicate the particle layer we made before and just tweak some settings. And make sure you disable the track matte because we don't need it for now. So to actually use the light, we will have to change the emitter type to lights and then disable the light intensity to none. So because it's using the settings we did before, we will have to change the emitter size back to something smaller. So it looks like it's actually following a path. Lower the velocity. And this is how it looks like with the clip. And that's pretty much all of the basic things you can do with particular and CinematicsBuddy. Now it's time for optical flares. First I'll show you how you can place a flare anywhere you want on the map, just like I did here. To do this, I'll be using the convert units command in Bacchus mod. When you're thinking where to put a flare on the map, it should usually be some kind of light source like the sun or a lamp, but in my case I'll just put it on this thing right there. Once you've found your spot, hit F6 and type in CB convert units. That will give you the After Effects coordinations to paste in. First, make a new light layer, add a new text layer, and paste in the values that you copied. Now we can use the After Effects position values for the light layer. You'll see that the light is positioned exactly where we were in the game. And I'll just make a new solid. We will add optical flares to it. So at first you can see the light is only 2D. So we will have to change the source type to track lights. Now it will be exactly where the light is. To see the background, you will have to change the render mode into transparent. To customize the flare, go into the options. Here you can create your own flares, but you can also pick some pre-made ones. I'll pick this for now. To composite the flare better in the scene, change the blending mode to either screen or add. Here's the difference between them. The next thing you can do is to add flicker. This will make the flare look more dynamic. There is one setting that's set by default when using light layers, which is use light intensity and use scale from intensity. This will take the light layer's intensity and use it for the scale and brightness of the optical flare. If you have these settings turned on, sometimes you might not see your flare at all, and that's because you have intensity set to 0. I usually disable them so I have more control over the flare. Another good use of optical flares is when you want to make a scene in space or just want something to fill in the background. I'll start by hiding the guide layers and making a new solid layer, then adding optical flares again. And once again I'll be using a light layer to navigate the flare. After you have the flare ready, move its layer below the car layer. Now it will be fully masked by the car. Duplicate the flare layer and put it on top of the car now. Now go into options and just disable any glow layers or light sources. Then press OK. Now you can see that some of the optical flare is still on top of the car. Now I'll show you how to make a light trap effect on the car. Duplicate your car layer and add a BCC light trap effect. Now in background, choose your optical flare main layer and then change the source to FX and mask, so it's using the optical flare plugin. I'll change the view to wrap only so we can see what's happening. Now whenever the flare is behind the car, it will make a glow around the car. We can make the glow stronger by adding deep glow to it and then adding set matte so it's actually masked out. So in the set matte, select the car layer again and switch to FX and masks. I'll unsolo the layer and change the blending mode to add. As you can see, it looks much better. Here's a comparison. And that's pretty much it for optical flares. Now let's move to sky replacement. Replacing the sky can make your scene look a lot more interesting and unique. It's also very simple to do. The main thing we'll be using is the depth map. We will be using it as our mask for the sky. For the sky itself, there are two effects that we can use. I'll make a new solid layer, and the first one is the horizon effect. It comes with the Trapcode plugins, so if you've used Particular, you will probably have it too. For the texture, you will need a 360 image that's very high resolution. Now just drop your texture into the composition and then go into Horizon, Image Map and select it here. Now we can rotate it however you want in the orientation and distort section. Move the horizon layer below the depth map layer and change the trick matte to Luma matte. You can already see the sky being replaced, but it's still see-through in some spots. We can fix that by adding levels into the depth map layer and then enabling the layer so you can see what's being changed. Now move the input black so only the sky stays white. Now it will look a little bit out of place. Duplicate your depth layer and reset the levels. Now add a new adjustment layer and also change it to Luma matte. Now I'm gonna add a fill, which we're gonna use to make fog. Move both the adjustment layer and the depth map layer below the sky, and now we can change the color of the fill to something dark. It should look a little bit more like it was at the start. We can also add some depth to the scene. We will duplicate the adjustment layer with the depth and replace the fill effect with camera lens blur. This is gonna blend the skybox and the map background better. If you don't have a nighttime scene, you might also have to play with the blending modes of the fog, something like soft light or screen. I'll just do a quick CC on top of everything. Since I'm changing the map from daytime to nighttime, I'll make some of the lights on the map glow a bit more to improve the atmosphere a bit. To do this, I'll duplicate the world layer, then add BCC linear color key, and I'll pick the color from the lamps here and switch from composite to invert alpha. I will add deep glow on top of that. Makes it look like it's actually nighttime. You can also put it on top of the fog. That will make them stronger and they won't be affected by the adjustment layer. And I think that's it for this part.
Poofers again here with how you can incorporate Blender into your Rocket League 3D workflow. This section will include how you can use a CinematicsBuddy track within Blender using a free After Effects script and a free Blender add-on that will both be in the description. This section will also include how you can composite your Blender additions onto your existing footage in After Effects through rendering out different 3D passes. Now that I'm in After Effects, I'm going to start by downloading the After Effects script. So to do that, I go to After Effects script file, open that drive link, it's going to take me here, I'm going to click download. When you go back into After Effects, you got to go to File, go down to Scripts, go to Install Script File. Now you're going to go to wherever you downloaded it, and you're going to import this JSON file. I already have it installed, so I'm going to click skip. Now that I have that installed, I can go into Blender now. I can make a new project. Now to install the add-on for Blender, first I'm going to go download it from the second link in the description. Click Edit, Preferences, go to Add-ons, Install, go to wherever it downloaded to, so I can click Install Add-on, and this is what it's called right here. It'll probably unchecked when you install it. All you gotta do is just click the check mark next to Import After Effects Composition, and that's all you gotta do for the installation of these two files. To actually utilize these two files, we're going to go back into After Effects and we're going to select everything from your CinematicsBuddy import. And we're going to go to File, Scripts to export composition data to JSON. And first we're going to pick a file location to save it, and then I'm going to select work area. This will probably be unchecked. Check it. This is all we need. So I click export, so now I can open Blender. I'm gonna delete everything for now. Now to import that data we just exported from After Effects, I'm gonna go to File, Import After Effects composition data converted. First find where you saved your composition data. So I have it here. I'm not going to double click it, just single click it. Comp center to origin, use comp resolution, and create new collection. Now that we have that imported, here are all the walls. These are good scale references in case you want to make something relative size to the car. So now that we have these, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to import a couple other models so we can get an export going. Alright, so we have a nice little Christmas tree here, so I'm just gonna quickly rotate this and I'm gonna put it in the center of my field. I'm gonna take my Christmas tree out of my pre-comp collection and I'm just going to hide these others so we don't see them in the renders. Now what I can do from here, first I'm going to set up my render. Now I'm just going to do a quick light. So for rendering, I usually don't recommend rendering at your full resolution simply because it would probably take a while. What you can do is you can just divide this by 2, you can divide this by 2. That might be a bit low for some people. For me it's fine. And then make sure this frame rate has to be the same frame rate as your footage, which in my case is 60. I don't want to render out PNGs. They take up way too much space. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna switch this to OpenEXR, and instead of lossless I'm gonna do DWAA lossy. Now this will reduce the file size and also give me a higher dynamic range. This is something that After Effects can read, so it works out. I want to make sure that I have RGBA so I can get the alpha. Now in order to actually get the alpha, I'm gonna move my camera out of this pre-comp, turn that off again, render settings. I can go to film and make this transparent. This is so when I render out, I don't have to worry about masking out this tree and whatnot. It'll already be cut out and all I have to do is add shadows. So right now I'm just gonna render this real quick and I'll come back when that's done. The 3D render has finished. I now have a full EXR sequence, and now that we don't don't need all of these other things. I'm just gonna hide these. I'm going to go to import file, wherever I rendered it to. For this, select the first one, go all the way down, hold shift and click. And then very important, you must click open EXR sequence. Check this little box right here. And then once you've done that, click import, and that'll show up in your project organizer. When we drag it in, it'll be super long. When I scale it up 200%, when I play it, it's not exactly synced up. And we're gonna fix that by going to right click on this, interpret footage main. Our frame rate of our animation, our camera was 60 FPS. So that's what I'm going to make this. And now it should line up, and now our layer is much shorter. So that is it for this part of the tutorial.
And that will bring you to the end of this 3D tutorial, guys. If you like this video, give it a like. If you got any questions, you want to see any more tutorials like this in the future, make sure you plot that down in the comment section. We'll be reading those, trying to keep up with it, see if we can give you guys the content that you guys want. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys later.